Directors meeting and budget meeting to order for today, May 12th, 2022. We've got a nice big group here, so let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready, begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Denise, can we get a roll call, please?
I got your back. Yeah.
Director Walper,
Yo.
Director Martinez. Here. Director Berman.
Here.
Director Johnston.
Here.
Director Wheeler.
Here.
Vice Chair Shibahara. Here. Chair Rydell.
Here.
Helena Snyder.
Here.
Jody Bever.
Here.
Melanie Wagner.
Here.
Lindsay Park.
Here.
Ralph Branson. Carol Kaiser Worthy.
Here.
Kendra Perkins. Have a quorum.
Quorum plus.
Plus.
All right. So here we are. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's nice having people close, too. This is really nice. So to kick off the budget season, we do need to elect a presiding officer for the 2021-2022 budget process.
22, 23, sorry.
I thought that sounded wrong, but I'm the news anchor that just reads the teleprompter.
Stay classy, San Diego.
2022-23 budget process. And so we need a nomination for a presiding officer.
I'd like to nominate Lindsay Park. She does such a superb job at it, I don't see any reason why we should change.
You need a second?
Yes, well, is there any
Or
other
you just
nominations,
nominate?
actually?
No, I would like to state for public record, though, that in the years that Lindsay has been the chair, we have had a clean audit every single year, so.
Okay, so we have Lindsay Park that's been nominated. Anybody else, any other nominations? I think there's a rule, if you've been nominated, you can't nominate someone else. There's not really.
Hands making.
I'm just gonna make that rule up, see this? Okay, I don't see any other nominations, so we have Lindsay Park that's been nominated. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Carries.
All right, so come on over.
Oh, I have to sit up there?
Yes, you
Take your name
do.
tag.
Get to get cozy with 10 up
You guys,
here.
yeah, you guys have to
A few times a year that I have to share my area, so,
remind me how to do
Well, this is the most
You should
comfortable spot.
I know.
right there.
All
Right
right.
in the left and next.
All right. Do we need to do an alternate now?
Yep, so you would go ahead and elect an alternate.
I elect, or I ask somebody else to
You
do
ask
that?
somebody to nominate.
Yeah, good. Phew. Do we have any nominations out there for an alternate? I'm not feeling very well.
I'd like to nominate Melanie Wagner.
Thank you. Any other nominations out there? No? Can we get a second?
Second that. Awesome, thank you, Jody.
Do we need to vote now? Is that how it works? All in favor?
Motion carries.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Helena and Melanie, for doing
Ken,
that.
Ken, will you move the microphone over to me?
Awesome. What's next?
You get the microphone. That's
Oh.
what's next.
I just talk really loud. I usually don't need one of those. so. Okay, budget methods, I think is the next thing. What, Superintendent Carpenter, is that from you?
Thank you.
I can stall if you need some more time.
Nope,
Oh,
I'm good,
okay.
thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to our Budget Committee as well as the Board of Directors. We are proud today to be able to present to you a budget that we believe is fiscally responsible to our taxpayers, representative of our community, and also finds ways to make sure that every dollar of our investment is focused on our mission, vision, and values of our strategic plan. And the funny thing is we now find ourselves in an exciting point in the school year where we can begin to reflect on all that's been accomplished during the year while simultaneously turning to look at the year ahead. The 21-22 school year has been a year filled with successes and celebrations as we complete an entire year with students back in the classroom, which I never thought there would be a time we would say that. We have faced many of the same obstacles as districts across the nation, the difficulties of navigating COVID-19 protocols, student learning gaps to address, and critical staffing levels. Despite these challenges, we have emerged leading the region. This year, we learned that our class of 2021 celebrated our organization's highest graduation rate ever seen in this school district's 100-year history. Our district received our second honor as the Oregon Top Workplace, providing critical assistance as organizations across the country struggled to recruit and retain our staff. The Estacada School District also retained its student body and continues to experience sustained growth. The Estacada School District's unshakable focus on continuous improvement has led its leaders to make accurate and impactful decisions and actions to ensure that our district makes continual growth on its path to being a premier place for employees to work, for students to learn, for parents to send their kids, and our employees to work. The Estacada School District's strategic plan, Envision Estacada Schools 2030, which many of you have been a part of its creation, is shaped around 5 strategic pillars. The annual goals and action items in each pillar are established to challenge the district community to stretch farther and think differently about the work we must do to empower our students and staff to inspire, engage, and achieve. The district's strategic plan is a roadmap for continued improvement and the relentless pursuit of ensuring that each and every student in our district achieves success. This budget serves the purpose of funding the execution of our strategic plan. Funds are carefully allocated to maximize their impact on student success. Our investment priorities consistently align with our strategic plan to support our mission, which is to equip all students with the skills necessary to be resourceful and successful. Our vision, which is to be considered a premier school district by the year 2030, and we are well on our way. And our values, which I said earlier, are to engage, inspire, and achieve. And so the budget that you see this evening, I am very proud of. I'm proud of the teamwork and energy and effort that was put into it. And I think you will see a budget that puts students first, allows us to be competitive as an educational organization, and sets us up for a bright future in alignment with our strategic plan. That's your superintendent's message.
Thank you. Do we go on to the next one,
We go
Ken?
on to
Is
the
that what we
next
do?
one, yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
perfect. Christina, you're taking over now. We're excited to hear about this binder that we have in front of us. I don't know, any hands of people that had an opportunity to review it prior to this meeting? I did not in the 5 hours, but I'm excited to hear what you have to say as an overview, and I'm sure there will be much discussion.
Yes.
Off to you.
Well, first, I want to say, for next year, my goal is to have it to you a week ahead of time. So we're going to
That would be
strive-
fantastic.
Yes.
We're used to this. At least this is how it's
Yes.
been for years for us. So we understand all the effort and time commitment that goes into this thing. But if we can get it earlier, we're not going to complain.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then it'll also be available to the community at that time, too. But my presentation will give you all the key highlights of the budget document and leaving you with no questions. The first thing we're going to discuss is our budget financial assumptions. We're talking about our revenues. Again, we're on the second year of the biennium of the $9.1 billion that was allotted to K-12 through the state school fund, and we get 51% of that this year. We are fully funded for our Measure 98, which is about $800 per student. We are also fully funded at our student investment account. And this is going to be the second year of our ESSER 3 plan, which we will talk all more about later. The financial assumption in the budget, we are doing a full school year, but converting to a 4-day work week with Fridays designated for targeted student support and staff development. We are budgeted a salary schedule step, And at this time, our COLA is status quo because we are still in negotiations on with all of our unions. So teachers are 2.5, classified is 2.5, and administrators are 2.5, and a 3% increase for health insurance benefits.
Can we
Also,
ask questions as we go, or do you want us to wait till the end?
you can ask questions, yes.
How did we arrive at the 2.5? I mean, inflation is 8.6.
2.5 was status quo. That was what the teachers' union was given last year. And then the classified was given a range between 2 and 2.5, so I just did 2.5 for all.
It is important to note, though, because I love your question, and even though inflation has risen, the state is not paying us 8 or 9% more per child. And so our funding does not move back and forth with the inflation rates. We still get the same amount per kid. And so, again, this is a move forward budget in terms of what we gave last time, rolling it over into this time. But I think it is important to note, just for in general and for public record, that even though inflation is growing, it doesn't necessarily mean we're being paid more money.
Sure.
And then our PERS costs, we're in the second year, and it will remain the same for this year. We are estimating a 5% liability insurance increase and a 5% utility increase.
Sorry, do utilities include, is that part of like transportation's gas and stuff like that?
Yes.
And we think 5%, okay.
Well, it's based upon 5% an increase and then looking at actuals too. So you estimate in there, yes. But again, we have to move the budget around without receiving that much more revenue. So we take the best we can based upon the actuals and what we're looking at. And then budget adjustments, some things that we changed in the budget. This year, we moved athletics from the general fund from the special revenue fund. And the reason why we're doing that is we're trying to make athletics more transparent. If you remember in history, we did a transfer to the athletics fund from the general fund, and we just feel it'll be more transparent to our public and to our board members having it sit in the general fund. The next thing is we created an operations budget in function 2510. And let me give you a little history about this. Prior to Mike and I, the position was combined, the finance position and the operations position. And when we came, our budget was combined. And so these next two lines is to separate us out. Mike will get the operations budget in 2510, and then I will be under fiscal services my team will be under 2520. And that's, again, another move to make us more transparent for our duties. The next thing is we moved outdoor school to special revenue. Outdoor school is a grant that we get from Oregon State, and so I feel it was more efficient for it to be under the special revenue. And then we did a staffing adjustment to eliminate a TOSA position and add an elementary teaching and learning director position to the teaching and learning department.
I got a question for you.
Yep.
In the past, you say that the operations budget and the finance budget were combined because it was under one person. How does this compare to history as far as the total?
Great question. So we had to separate it out a little bit. So the 2510, Director Ware previously used some of his facilities budget and the finance budget, and now he'll have his own budget. And so I looked at his history and worked with him on what he needs with the budget. Superintendent Carpenter and I did, and that's what we're moving forward based upon what he feels he needs and what his history has been used.
That's
out of
fine,
those
but
two
that's
budgets.
not my question. My question is, how does the two compare to the single that has been in history? So in other words, if you're spending $50,000 and he's spending $50,000 a year, now in the
Yeah.
past it was $100,000. Now is it still $100,000? Do you each get 50, or does one get 75 and one gets 25? I mean, how does it compare?
Yeah, great question. Well, and you can see when you look at those two lines, they are straight. We didn't just take that amount and divide it between the two of them. We did look at based upon needs of what he needs for his department and I need from my department, because now that it's separated out, we still both have costs that we need. It's not, we're not sharing the same lines.
Okay, but
So-
how does that compare to history?
I can look at, you can see, well, you won't see the history for 2520, but you can look in the, in here, and I can tell you what page it's on.
Okay.
But it would reflect the 2510 would reflect a cut, right?
Yes, 2510 will, yes.
It's just moving things from one bucket to the other, right?
Yes.
It's still
Correct.
one.
But, yeah.
shows the
Yeah.
past years.
Yeah, so if you look at page 11 right here, you'll see the history of 2510, and that was where we were combined. And then Mike also used some of 2542, I believe. And then in the next page, you'll see where finance is allocated.
So it's just more transparently dividing them so you know that this percentage is for finance and this percentage is for operations. But
Right.
overall, it's the same total budget, just trying to better.
Right, so last
track
year,
divide.
Same.
Percent or whatever.
Not exactly the same.
not
Yeah.
exactly,
But
last
essentially
year it was
Similar,
300
but
and.
they may go up a bit or.
Yeah, so last year it was 379 if you combine both of them. Finances, it is higher this year. And and I can talk about, yes, 472,000, and then 228 for operations.
So it
So
looks
almost
to,
double.
it's almost $100,000 less in business. Am I seeing that right? 2510 from last year to this year, so looks like $100,000 came out of the business department and went to operations.
And that includes our FTE moving too. So the people in my department moved down to 2520. And then Mike and then his secretary are in 2510. So there's that difference too. So that's a part of the adjustments.
Secretary in there before?
Uh,
Well, the 2510 is a new, no, 2510 existed, 2520 is the new category.
Right. And she previously also was in transportation and we moved her more to 2510 now too.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to compare
Yeah,
exactly at this point.
I mean, it did almost double
Yeah,
yeah.
yep,
year over year
yes.
for administrative services. That's kind of an overall question I have for support services is, if I look at this from a business perspective, you've got almost a quarter of your budget. In fact, on the pie chart, it says 26% in support services. So I have, I guess, a two-part question to that. One, do support services include the charter school? Because if not, then how on earth does the charter school with almost 45% of your students operate with only a quarter of the budget? And then my second thing is, if I'm running a business, 26% in support services, and I'm an accountant, I'm a support service person, I know I always have to fight for my budget, but that's a lot. I would be at 10 or 15%. You put your money where your money comes from, your kids.
So we could go a little bit more about everything that is included in support services as I go through the slides if you would like.
Sure, I guess
Yeah.
it's just kind of a, maybe the
includes-
first part question can be answered is, does the charter school have their own support services, or do you guys?
No,
support
that,
them
and
as
charter
well?
school's under 1288, so that would be under instructional.
But they have their own support, like they have their own admin and their own accountant and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So how
they do all of their own out of that. We paid them a portion of the state school fund under 1288, and they get to manage their charter school.
Right, you're giving them a quarter of the budget, 10.4 million. So they have 43% of the students in the district. They get 25% of the budget and still manage to have their own support services. So how does Estacada School District justify the other 75% where a quarter of that is going to support services? I guess I'm,
Well, I'll take a stab at this.
Okay.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness in your question. And I'm sure as we go through the presentation, some of your questions will get answered as we go through that process. But to compare the charter schools setup and operations to public K-12 setup and operations are like comparing apples and oranges. So charter schools class size to teacher ratio is between 40 to 50 to 1, where we try to keep it more like 25%. Our special education population is closer to 16 to 18%, which requires significant more services, specifically in support services, different than that of the charter school. And they just have different overhead costs, up to including free rent of a building in that perspective as well. And so what is required to run a charter school is significantly different than what's required to run our services.
okay, that's fair.
I have also, I don't know if this plays into it, but the charter school doesn't run buses, doesn't serve meals,
Yeah,
doesn't run an athletic program. And
Correct.
So I think there's a lot of, just like you were saying, it's
Yeah.
like, it's hard to compare that because what they're doing is phenomenal.
I agree.
But it's not like a brick and mortar school with all the things that are provided. And I think there are some, there's a little back and forth on the athletics and the, maybe a counselor, I'm not sure if that goes.
Yeah,
they
we
share,
do,
but-
well, and that's another good point, is that we run their 100% of all of their special education services as well. And so I think we have 4 employees that belong to us that work and run 100% of all legally mandated special education services.
For public record, can we state that it's specific to that charter school?
Correct.
Because that's the only one we have that visibility on.
Yeah.
Other charter schools might operate different.
Sure.
But yeah.
I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of your question, though. Yeah, and I'm sure many people have questions about that and how, because really we collect charter school money for them and we pass it through. So to some extent, we're a middle person in how all of that plays out too. Yep.
Sure.
Are we done with the assumption, sorry. Are we done with the assumptions at this point in time? Okay. These are adjustments.
Yeah,
So really quick, before we get too far away from it, so those earlier slides were the assumptions, and Carol, I appreciate your question and your kind of question around, we're assuming 2.5%, right? We don't know where that's gonna land, but we also can't guess. And so what we have to do is make assumptions, and the most responsible way to make those assumptions is to use the status quo instead of just making up a number. What we do know is when all of those negotiations are done, those numbers will turn from the 2.5 assumption to whatever that final number is. And that typically will happen after the budget is done, because we have to finalize and approve the budget before those negotiations have to be completed. So when that happens, whatever that number is, we would then have to move funds from the general fund. This would be a school board conversation. Move funds from the general fund into that fund to then pay for those, the COLAs that come after the bargaining happens.
And can you remind me what the amount is, that if you stay within a certain percentage of change, you do not have to bring it back to the budget committee? What is that percentage again?
I think it's 20%.
20%?
Yeah, sorry.
And is that what the contingency fund is essentially for, or how,
The contingent.
I'm jumping like way
No.
ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
contingent.
This is my first year.
Yeah, contingency fund is for an emergency. If something were to drastically happen in the district, we could use the contingency fund after we take it to the board and get approval to use it for that. So, for example, we had a major repair in one of our schools. We could use the contingency fund for that. Or if we had a huge increase in price or settlement or something, we could use it for that.
Can the contingency fund be used at the end of the year once it's sort of, at this time period, it's kind of been identified probably that you're not gonna have any of those large surprises? Can you use that to increase, I don't know the condition of the schools. I admittedly don't have any children in Estacada School District, so, but can you use that to better classrooms, have better supplies, stock up for next year, any of that kind of stuff? Or is it automatically have to roll over?
at this point, we're using it as part of our projection for beginning fund balance for this next year. If we were to do that, I would need to take it to the board and get approval to use it in, so when we have permissions and appropriation levels, so we have instruction, support services, community support. And if we're going to move it from contingency to instruction, I have to take it to the board and get their approval to do that and explain why we would need it for that. So for example, if we're getting close to the end of the year and I'm looking like our salaries, our instructional will be over, I would take it to the board and say, can I move, 100,000 from contingency to the instructional?
So that's why it doesn't show any of this year's contingency yet being used, because you haven't
Right.
reached that point.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
And it's been our philosophy to use that as a savings account as well. And so if we were to earmark that money that we have in savings to, replace a whole school building's desks, for example, then we would need to, in order to refill that pool of our savings for emergency for next year and the years beyond, we would still have to take that money from somewhere. And so we use the contingency, at least historically in our district, as that savings in case the boiler does break, which is likely, or in case, pipes break or those kind of things, or we've used it before. This area that we're sitting in used to be condemned. And so we do chip away at those things, but we still try to keep that savings just in case there is an emergency.
And you won't see ever actuals in contingency. It's stayed there until we move it to another appropriation level,
Got it, so it will always be that 2.75.
unless we move it to,
But you won't see an expense hit contingency. What
Yeah.
you'll see is a
You'll just
move
see
from
it
contingency to the other fund that
And
it
you'll
needs to be
see
spent.
the other thing out of budget.
You'll see this one come
You
up
spent
and this
more.
one go down.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think while we're talking this too, historically, I won't say historically, we are doing a much better job now of budgeting more accurately. And so potentially in the past, budgets have been kind of over budgeted to a certain extent and a bunch of things in there and they kind of flowed back and forth. And we as a group have agreed we don't like that. We want to see by fund, by object. And so we do more transfers now than we did maybe 5-6 years ago because we're being more diligent in how those things are being budgeted. And so we may do 2 or 3 a year as opposed to we went years without ever moving anything because of how the budget was done.
Yeah.
This provides a significant higher level of transparency into where the money's being spent.
Okay. So that leads me, you mentioned capital projects. I have a question about that. So you fund capital projects from the cash that you have in the current year budget, or are there special, requests that you make to the state, for example, for large capital expenditures, or do you take a loan?
There's a few things. So we have a capital projects fund, which we receive money from the county and from the city for construction excise tax. And that's what we use to maintain our buildings. The only other way we can get money from the state is if our voters approve a bond. And that would also be in a 400 fund. But at this time, we don't, our last bond was 2001. Yeah.
We
And
do,
that-
however, apply for grants and are
Yes.
awarded grants on a regular basis to
Right.
help that. The middle school roof was funded almost entirely by grants, if I
Yep,
recall correctly.
it was.
right?
And
Entirely.
in this budget, you have the River Mill seismic grant too. So that's also in the 400 fund.
So what's in capital, aside from grants, is what the district has saved up through the construction excise tax over years to create that account.
Okay.
And you'll see, and when we get to there's a request for part of our transfers to move some money to the capital projects fund from the general fund to help support that.
Okay.
Great
Thank you.
questions.
All right. I think in the essence of time, let's
Yeah,
get
keep
rolling
going.
through and then we'll
Okay.
ask them as we come to them.
Okay.
Thank you for the questions, Carol. Sorry.
Okay.
You're doing
Over as your
great. No,
presiding
you're doing a
officer.
great job. You're doing a great job, Jen.
So general fund revenue final assumptions and estimates, our beginning fund balance is actually, that is just beginning fund balance of 4.05. Actually, I think that's a little higher. I'm sorry about that. Property tax is 7 million and intermediate and federal revenues is 820 million. Let me look and see what the beginning fund balance is real quick. I had my state school fund adjustment, so I changed it. It is 5.4 million, our beginning fund balance for the general fund.
So on page D versus E, you have current year's taxes in 2022-23 proposed at 6.8, but you have 2022-23.
Where are you at?
Page D, it just has a D at the bottom. It's like right after the line charts.
And where are you looking? I'm sorry.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but the current year's taxes is proposed at 6.8, but we had 7.5 year-to-date actual. Why wouldn't we?
Great question. So that number I had to estimate back in December before all of our taxes were finished. And so we do get to go back and take a look and with the state, but that was an estimate from back in December. In December, we estimate our enrollment and we estimate our local revenue, and that's how we come about our state school fund amount. So that's the numbers that we had in December.
Okay. So if that number goes up, is that money that gets to go into the contingency savings account, or?
No, so if that money actually goes up, it will impact, if you remember our state school fund that I walked through, it will lower the amount we're getting from the state. So it's they'll take the amount of local revenue and they'll take that away from the amount of state school fund we get. So it won't give us actually more money.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
It is a bummer, yes. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, and then our state school fund is 9.1 billion. We get the 49, and that's the state level, not our portion, 9.1 billion. It's a 4951 funding for the 2021-23 biennium. Our share is just over 26.4 million, and that's broken out by enrollment, including charter school, the 24.87. Our transportation grant is 1.19 million, and our common school fund is 334,000. And you can see there that we walked through this last time at our meeting, the fund formula. And then our final assumptions that we made back in December was our enrollment, and here's where you can see that. They take the higher of the two, so you could see the 2022-23 ADMW, the weighted number, if you remember that, it has several different things that impact that, is 3,483. This current year, we're at 3,398, so not too much difference there. But they're going to use the higher of the 2 years, which is our 3,483 when it comes to the formula. Here's a take a look of our historical enrollment, and this is as of December when we're normally reporting it to the state. You can see here our actual for 2021-22 in December was 1,732. Our proposed that I gave them was 1,742. And we're estimating an increase of about to get us about 1,759 for the following year. And here's that weighted, how you get from ADMR to ADMW. And you can reminder that our current year, the 2022-23 does include the charter school number. So that's why it is higher than the 2021-22. Okay, so the 2022-23 proposed budget for all funds. You'll see here from the adopted budget, it is an increase of 10.3 million or 21.12% from last year. I want to call out, if you board remembers, we did do a supplemental budget because we did have the higher revenue, and the difference from that number is 3.7 million or 6.63%. I thought that was really important to notice that we're not going up significantly from the last budget. In those things, the things that I'm recognizing is SIA fully funded, our River Mill seismic grant, the remaining amount of our ESSER 3 are still, our general fund beginning balance still, we'll talk more about this, but the increase of it from our ESSER funding and our additional funding that we got last year. And our one-time grants, such as like the summer school and our recruit and retain grant that we're estimating to get.
That's how we're coming up with the extra 10.3 million, is through those.
It's all those pots of money, yeah.
But again, the 10.3 is
last
over the
year's.
adopted budget, not the actual budget from
Correct.
last year, because that budget went up by another 6 million, so it's really only 3.7
Yeah.
over
Well-
the actual from last year.
Right.
We did, I think it was in July, we would took to the board a supplemental budget once we identified that our beginning fund balance was higher.
That's because we have to adopt it so early before we know a lot of the things because of the timelines and stuff, right?
Yes,
This
exactly.
happens pretty much every year, right?
Exactly.
You adopt and then adjust.
And again, it was over the 20%, so we did a supplemental budget at that time. Okay? So the proposed budget, 53% or 31 million of our revenue is state funding. And then local services is 13.4 million or 18%. This is the one pie chart we've already discussed. Our instructional services is 28 million or 47% of the expenditures. And then 27% or 16.1 million is support services.
Is this breakdown similar to how other districts our size
Mhm.
are?
In my experience, very much, yes.
And so, and this is last year's, because this year's we're at 26 and 48%, and the other items are about the same, it looks like.
Yeah, and just so you know so instructional services are direct contact with students, such as the teachers, and so in support services, that includes like counselors, speech path, principals, transportation, maintenance, anything, communications, anything that's not directly related or touching a student is support services.
Transportation is totally direct.
I was gonna say, even though I would argue food services,
Yeah,
custodian.
yeah, you're right, you're right.
It's not instruction, it
Yeah.
just doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
fit
Not
in.
providing direct instruction
But
to
it's not,
students.
it's not just the overhead of, right, the district office, there's a lot of stuff. that-
For sure.
Yeah.
In fact, in comparison, our district office size is half the size of most school districts our size.
All utilities,
Carol,
everything.
Does that make
Page-
you feel a little bit better knowing?
I1?
knowing-
I1 puts a, page I1.
Page I1
is a pretty good list of.
Breakdown?
And so you can see anything
yeah.
that starts with a 2 is in that 2,000
Yeah.
support services, so
Great,
speech
thank you.
path, student treatments, student support, improvement of instruction, curriculum development, all of those things fit into that 26% this year.
So unless my math is off, and the only thing I'm looking at is I was just looking from last year's to this year's numbers where they changed. Our pie chart in our pamphlet adds up to 104% rather than 100%.
Oh, wow.
So, because the 4,000 went up to 5%, everything else either stayed the same or just swapped. I don't know where that would come from.
I'll check our pie chart. That's all formulas driven, so
I thought,
47,
that can't be wrong, but I'm
27,
like, my head math was,
50.
104.
Yeah,
It is.
great.
maybe it's all right in here, but the picture, sorry.
The numbers are right. Yeah.
Nice, Jody.
Yeah, anyhow.
Okay, so the 2023 proposed budgets, you'll see here a list of how we break out, a chart of how we break out our salaries, our benefits, and our total. You see the actual for 2018-19, the actual for 2019-20, the actual for 2020-21, and our adopted 2021-22, and our proposed for 2022-23. And you see here our FTE additions we're doing in this budget compared to the adopted budget. We have 0.5 English language teacher, a 0.5 transportation tech, a 0.5 physical therapist, one FTE for a school psychologist, and a 1.6251 FTE for elementary library assistants. Any questions on that?
That seems high for the elementary library assistants. Is that just because we didn't have any before?
Correct.
Right.
During COVID in our quarantine schools, and as we brought folks back on, one of the needs of each elementary school was a place for our teachers to take students for about a half an hour to provide them prep and just multimedia experience. We used that with general fund dollars, I think.
Yes,
General
exactly.
fund dollars last year to support that, but it wasn't in the budget. And so now we're putting that in the budget. And 1.6 equals, it's because it's 3, I believe, and they're like 0.7 in each of our 3 buildings.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you look at these, I just want to point, only one of them is the instructional. Rest of those are all, even though they're certified, they're support services, the physical therapist, the psychologist. So just kind of pointing out even. Okay, here's the proposed budget. You could see it broken out by general fund, special revenue fund, debt service, and capital constructions. This is on page G2 of your budget. And the total amount equals $58,967,077.
Where is G2? Did anybody find G2?
Oh, is it G1? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I updated this so that it wasn't sideways.
I'll learn my alphabet again.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
The proposed general fund budget, this is just general fund. So general fund is $40,319,560. It's an increase of 3.7 million or 10.24 compared to the adopted budget. It's an increase of 1.2 million or 3.18 of after the supplemental budget. A big part of that, again, is the beginning fund balance, and that we do have an increased state school fund due to the 51%. The primary source of the revenue is for the general fund is our state sources, and that's 26.7 million or 66.2% of all sources. The second is our local services, which is 7.5 million or 19%.
Jody, did you check the math on those percentages?
I'm checking the math, and none of it's lining up for me, so
None
I'm
of
doing
it
something
is?
wrong. But it does look like that line 4,000 is more like 2% of the budget.
Okay, I'll check that and see why that's not working. I'm sorry.
2%. Anyway. Because obviously, if it's just the chart wrong, that's not a big deal, but
I can guarantee you the numbers are right,
I believe it.
but I don't know why my pie charts aren't working.
Anyway.
Salaries and associated payroll costs are the largest budget category at 21.7 million or 54%. Purchase services, which also includes our sub-cost, you can see there is at 32%. So that means 86% of our budget is fixed or contracted cost. And this is on page C1 of your proposed budget. It takes a look at this year's budget, and this is after the supplemental budget. And it takes a look at our projections, and then our proposed, and then you can see the changes and the difference in there. And this is a list of our transfers that we're proposing for next year. And I just want to talk a little bit about this. Food service, we're projecting to transfer 50,000. Transportation is 240 for bus purchases. We are requesting curriculum adoption of 400,000. And then these are two new ones that we're doing. A tech replacement, as you remember, we just have had a whole bunch of tech purchases for our students and staff, and we think it's important to be able to maintain them. So this is what is estimated to be able to keep an ongoing replacement up. And then we are having new turf done, so we need to starting to consider how we're going to keep that up and replace that in 10 to 12 years. So we're proposing to add a little bit each year going forward, so it's not a big hit when 10 to 12 years come.
That money already exists in watering and other maintenance to some extent, right?
Yes, good. Yeah, it could be.
Somewhat of a trade-off.
Do we know, you may know what kind of amount, how that compares to what those maintenance costs were before? Do you recall?
There's a whole PowerPoint on that.
Yeah, Mike.
They could dig up.
I think
Yeah,
the 10-year payback, once you get the turf installed, it's a wash.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty darn close to a wash.
If not an increase.
Yep.
A decrease in expenses.
You got like 8 times the use and the same cost or a little less.
Well, and safety of kids, I mean, that
Yeah.
field needed to be replaced, so.
Yeah.
So does that interfund transfer take into account the savings? Or do we think that 65,000 might decrease over the years?
Well, the savings would be in the expenses, and so then we're moving instead of having it in the expense line, we're moving it to the interfund transfer.
Okay.
So basically into the savings account.
It's just a separate savings.
Yeah.
So in
And
260
it'd be
okay.
moving, you can see there, we created a special revenue fund where it would hold the money until that item is needed.
On 262, that 400K, does that, what did we approve in that last board meeting for new curriculum? Was it,
300,000
and so
for
then
that
that
one.
leaves enough for the rest of your curriculum,
Yeah.
taking that bite out?
Well, that 300,000 that we approved was just K-8, and so we are expecting, I think, math is next year's, and so that's what we're projecting for books.
And on 252, the transportation, if I remember correctly, there was a requirement that we had to replace buses. Is that back in the loop now?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
And what is our deadline on that again?
2025.
2025.
And then our biomass boiler, that's for our debt payment for our biomass. And then we're also proposing a capital improvements transfer.
How much longer on the 302?
Ooh, good question. I can look that up. I don't have that right off the top of my
We
head.
can get it later. Yeah.
Okay. So now the student investment account, as I did say, we're very excited that this is fully funded. Last year, it was only 70% in the budget we were projected, but we did get full funds for it. And here's a list of some of the items that we've been able to do with our student investment account. I can read them. Middle school vocational program, high school vocational program, additional paraprofessionals, teachers on special assignment, vice principal at the K-5 level, and class size reduction, K-5 level, and a middle school PE teacher, just some of them.
This is the cat tax, right?
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
A few
The
more.
funny thing about it is some of the bids on the football field have a cat tax line item, so we're getting billed for our own bill.
Oh,
Is that it?
lovely because you pay it 3 times on everything, it
Yeah.
feels like.
A few more things, we're also able to provide training and development in the following areas: building equity, diversity, and inclusion, building academic language through K through 12, and language for all for K through 5s. And those were items that were still needed, that we're looking like we can, actually, we did do further increase the number of paraprofessionals when we got fully funded. And then high school success, which was ballot measure 98. We are expected to get approximately 420,000. It gives us expanded options. It's given us a 0.5 auto teacher, a 0.3 vice principal, RTS teacher, a career and college coordinator, a ninth grade success, summer supports, and a CT program upgrades.
Used by the 0.3 vice principal.
The other 0.7 is funded by general fund.
Okay. I'm like, I hope there's a hole
Yes.
somewhere.
Shows up on Tuesday and Thursday this week.
Thursday.
No, might be a little bit. Okay.
Is the ninth grade success, is that freshman on track? Is freshman on track still a thing? Because that seems like it's been a while since we've had anybody speak on it directly.
We monitor it regularly, and when we give our pillar reports occasionally, that's reflected in some of the data that you see.
And then here's our ESSA3 spending plan. This was approved by the board and by ODE. This was as of the beginning of April. We had spent April 7th, it says, 838,000 of our projected year one budget of 1.38. And we have a year two budget of 320,000 and a year three budget of 320,000. And when I'm doing my budget, I estimate how much we're going to have left of year one, and then I budget year two and year three just in case there's anything. So that is a part of the special revenue budget. And you can see there, the things we're purchasing for next year is the contracted services for CNAs, the summer school, community liaison, hotspots, access control, and PPE still. I think that's it. Any questions on ESSER 3?
Line 10, all the way to the right, is this 25,000? Is that supposed to be 250,000? Is it supposed to reflect?
No, that's year two and year three. That's going to be monitoring cost, and then eventually we'll move those costs to the general fund.
So, but on the rest of them, it reflects the line in estimated year one?
Year one was the initial cost of the setup and the enrollment and getting it set up in all of our schools. And year two and three are the ongoing monitoring costs.
Are you able to move these dollars around based on actuals where you've got 1% of your PPE budget spent?
Any changes to this plan, we would need to bring to the board and back to ODE, which there probably will be coming in June. Yep. But at this time, the moment I prepared the budget, this is what I knew. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation of the proposed budget. Now on to ongoing. So this budget is fiscally responsible because we are aware that at this time, the state is projecting a fiscal cliff or a recession or both. And just kind of, this is a great picture and I wanted to explain why. Last year, we were funded with ESSER dollars, and also we did receive other little pots. We received additional money, ESSER money for our IDA, ESSER money for summer school. We received lots of different pots of money, which is why you saw this is a history of our beginning fund balance. The blue was our projections, the red was our actuals. And you see there, last year we had a very big increase of our beginning fund balance, or this year, at the beginning of this year. And that's because of those dollars that we were able to use normally general fund dollars in other ways. So we are projecting that to go down. It is going down where we've used those dollars. But when next year, the revenue, we're expecting it to just go back and drop tremendously. We're not going to have those dollars anymore, but we have the same services, so we're going to have to make decisions. So we tried hard to be fiscally responsible with our budget. And that's all I have.
Free money's nice when you get it.
Yes, very nice,
right?
until it stops.
Nothing's free.
Yeah, exactly. unanticipated money, we'll put it that way.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah. Questions? Questions? More questions? I know it's hard because we're trying to absorb it all very, very quickly.
No, I'm mulling this over in my mind. We're gonna have an increase in utilities. However, we're no longer gonna have to water the lawn across the street. It looks to me, this may be crass, but if we don't eliminate an individual that has to do all of that, then where's the savings?
I think that's a legitimate question. We are only installing one artificial turf football field on a 30-acre campus. And so when we think about the mowing and the upkeep of the natural turf fields, we're not actually reducing too much of the scope when it comes to the mowing. I think where you will see your savings is in the water. Because we use a wheel, it's not even irrigated. We use a gigantic irrigation sprinkler that just waters 24 hours a day during the summertime. And I think that's going to be ultimately where you'll start to see the savings, as well as in the seed and in the fertilizer and in some man hours. But I would like to instead of saving the money, I'd like to reallocate the hours, the labor hours, into beautifying other parts of our school district or enhancing them to some extent. But I don't think the money is saved necessarily in the employment of the work. I think the money is saved in some of the ancillary things.
Also,
Oh, and lighting too, with
yeah,
with
that's
new
what I was
lights.
gonna bring up next.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
Mike Ware was telling
Yeah.
us that we were gonna save money with the lighting.
Yes.
And I was thinking, in my mind, between the savings of the electricity for the lighting and the water for the field, why do we have an increase in utilities?
We have a lot of other utilities that we use as a district telephone, and we averaged, the 5% was an average that when you do the appropriation level, we can move the budget around between the different utilities. So all that was considered with the only 5% when we know that the actual increase of utilities has been more than 5%.
Awesome.
Not necessarily, yeah. Does that make sense? So the cost of water has gone up, but we're using less of it. But the
Oh, no,
cost
I'm
of
on a
telephone, oh, okay. Yeah. Cost of telephone, cost of gas, all of that has gone up. But we do have some, some cost savings that we have found. That's why we only chose to go 5% in our utility.
The other thing, back to Ryan's point too, is when we reallocate those hours from our facilities and maintenance group, we can also do repairs that, historically, we may have had to pay somebody to pave a sidewalk or build a sidewalk where we could have the manpower to do that ourselves. And so it's not just, they've got more hours to sit around and, stare at their lunch.
So then that budget line should drop.
Well, we don't have a specific, but that's in the capital improvements budget. So we spend less of the money that we have budgeted for the capital improvements, fractionally, not a ton. But we can do some of that on our own instead of paying somebody else to do it.
Thank you.
I think we're getting to the point where we have like
It's a thank
10,
you.
15 minutes maybe. And I don't know that we're at a point where we would want to, move forward. Maybe we need more time. How are you all feeling about that?
My intention was that I never come up with any really hard questions to ask you between now and the next meeting, so we could go ahead and approve it tonight, but it's a lot to absorb in one night. And if everybody else doesn't mind meeting again. My thought was, yeah.
I agree,
Just
Melanie,
be
but
here,
just
be here.
personally to feel good about what I'm doing
Yeah,
here, and,
I think
I
so.
know that we are kind of like a necessary evil, right? But to feel good about what we're doing and providing an approved budget, I like to have a little bit more time,
Right.
even if it isn't more questions
More
for Christina,
questions.
it's just getting comfortable with what we're doing.
Yeah.
Better understanding what's in front of us.
I would agree with that.
so Ken's gonna help me make sure I'm doing this right, then we would just move then to somebody, does somebody have to motion to recess until next time, or is it just we're gonna do that?
You would just recess at this point. in time.
Lindsay, can I ask, though, if there are additional questions, that I get them maybe before the end of the week so that I have time to address them before our next meeting?
So end of the week, meaning tomorrow?
Oh, wait,
by-
today is not, I'm way
No,
lost in days.
No, that's okay, I wanna make sure.
I
we get
would
it to
like
you.
maybe we say Monday or Tuesday at the latest,
I
so
think
that I
that's-
have a good turnaround time to make sure I'm responding to everyone's questions.
I think by Monday, end of day Monday is totally reasonable, especially because we'd have the weekend then to provide questions to Christina on Monday. So yes, we could.
too, I'm laughing.
Two, or
If
do you want
somebody
them
wanted to
just
sit
in
down
the-
with you, Christina, and go through more details, would you have time to do that before the next meeting? Like, I'm not an accountant, so
Of
I
course.
don't- Yeah, but I know that some people here really, you guys can.
And I will look at the pie charts, and since we are having another one, I will update the pie charts. Sorry about that. It's weird, it's a total formula, so I will look at
Yeah,
that.
and I totally did all the math and like, yeah, it does not.
Gotta be,
Why not?
it's probably rounding.
And
Yeah.
Well, it's off by like 4 million.
Yeah.
It's not just a rounding thing. But
The
that
pie
doesn't really
chart-
matter, because as long as the numbers are allocated where you want them to be, that's what matters.
Yeah.
It's just for me going, wait, that doesn't line up, my
Yeah.
brain couldn't
Yeah.
Well,
handle that.
Being a visual
So,
person, right?
just,
'Cause,
yeah. So, and the main thing that I saw, just so you know, maybe it'll make it easier for you, is what I was finding was that the 5,100 really coming in, you said 15%, that ought to come in at almost 9 million.
what page are you on?
On G1. If my math is right, at 15% of almost 59 million, that ought to be almost 9 million in that category. Whereas at category 5,000, you had at 5%, which really should only be 3 million, but we've got it at 4.8. So I'm not sure, as long as your numbers are where you want them to be, it doesn't really matter what the percentage is. But anyway, my brain just.
When you're motioning to approve, you're motioning to approve G1, right there, is what you're
G1 is
motioning.
what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so that's what, the numbers in that, those are my correct numbers that match
Pie
every,
chart's just for ease of looking at.
Yes,
right? That's
Sure.
what I
Yes.
But we
figured,
still want to put together an accurate
Yes.
package.
100%, we shouldn't have more than 100%, yeah.
yeah.
Shouldn't have more than 100%, and the numbers just don't line up with those percentages.
Yeah.
So if we want to be totally transparent, if it was.
Yes, I agree.
Oh, they're putting this much here, but it's really not.
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
anyway.
So if we tabled this, when would we vote on it?
We have a meeting scheduled for 7 next Thursday.
Is that gonna be in person? It says Zoom meeting here. What,
It would be in
it's
person.
gonna be in person? Okay.
Yes.
Now, are we under the gun to get it done by a certain time based on the state's requirements?
Yes.
When is that?
Yeah, so it should go to the board at the June board meeting, so the budget committee would need to approve it before it goes to the board. But the board has till June 30th to adopt it.
But it would be in our normal June meeting, so the
And-
second Thursday of June.
Yep.
And it needs to be approved by this committee to be presented to the board.
Yep,
Otherwise, we can't operate in July.
right. Correct.
So we're really not under the gun to have it done by Tuesday.
Wouldn't be done by Tuesday. It would clear, if the budget committee is satisfied next week, then it would move out of the committee and to the board, which would be the next scheduled board meeting. So we just need to get it out of committee prior to June's board meeting.
But the urgency for Tuesday, John, is to go through this and get questions to Christina by Tuesday. so
By
that she
Monday,
can get-
Monday.
End of day Monday.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sorry.
Ken remembers.
So that she has time to dig that information up and have it prepared to bring back to the group by next Thursday for the next budget meeting.
So, there is one question, I'm gonna try to get out of it, but I've got a work meeting on May 19th at 7 o'clock. So if I have any questions, I send them to you, can I email saying, with the answers you've given me, I would be able to approve this budget if I'm not able to be here?
I don't know how that works.
No, you would have to be in person to
Yeah.
approve the
But so
budget.
as long as we have a quorum, though, we could still move forward. But I would please do
Yeah,
share your opinion.
your support does matter though,
Yeah.
Jody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say, Jody, send those to Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Yeah,
Right, as
happy
the-
to share my
yep,
information.
As the presiding officer.
Try to get out of it, but I'm not sure.
That would be great. Thank you. Okay, I think that we are, any other questions or comments before we go ahead and adjourn until next Thursday at 7 PM?
One quick question, 8's a quorum, right?
There's 14, yes. Well, yes, 8 is a quorum.
Do we know the status of Kendra and Ralph?
No. I will contact them.
I have a conflict and I know
I'm
that
out of
Ryan-
town.
I'm actually out of town too.
Oh,
We need to work on that
Got
date.
most done.
is the date squishy? Can we try to?
No, it's been published.
Okay, gotcha.
But
If
we
it's a
could-
Zoom
Yeah, but we
meeting,
can
I
change
can join
Well, then
Zoom.
there's a third one
We can
on
change
the,
it.
the third one on the calendar is the 26th of May. I don't know if that's any better because that's right against the holiday weekend, right?
That one works for me, but-
Because we could consider just waiting until then, couldn't we?
All 3 dates are published.
Are there 8 of us that would be
And
here?
if next week doesn't work, I
Be here next week.
could get something out next, I just have to publicize 5 days in advance if there's going to be a different
Can
one.
change it.
Oh, just
We-
5
we
days in
can
advance, we
change
could
it.
work on it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
But is that in the paper? So you don't
It
put
has
that
to be in the
Thursday?
paper, so I would have to, it would have to go out and, it wouldn't make it out in next week's paper. So,
That's,
Doesn't it
Is
come
there a
out on
better night
Thursday?
of a week? Because I know that Tuesdays and Thursdays has a series of conflicts with some people in this room.
Ken, you can get out of it.
That's not actually my conflict next Thursday. Next Thursday's a work day, but yes.
Most Tuesdays or Thursdays, I'm fine, it's just this particular
Okay.
one I have a.
how about allow us to, allow Christina and I to look at calendars, and we'll meet with Lindsay and with Chair Idell and communicate a better one. I know that we can find a more appropriate date for this team to get together. I think it would be disingenuous for us to come together without everybody at the table
As many
to
of
make
us
that
as
happen. And we will remain in compliance with public meeting law, which we know that the newspaper is a factor, but the Esticated News is on its way out, so we're gonna have to find a new paper to measure that quote paper unquote satisfaction. And so we've been able to post things on the door, post things on the website, do different things that are public meetings. So we'll be able to find a way to do this in a transparent fashion and still accommodate everybody's needs.
Thank you, Superintendent Carpenter, that's
Yeah.
much appreciated.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Can I adjourn? Do I adjourn, Ken?
Do it.
Thank you. I'll adjourn. Thank you.